Well, first of all, my name is Frank Vega. Up front here we have Michael Robillard. We are the co-chairs for the IW sessions. I want to thank, first of all of our presenters who did an IW session. I know some of you aren't here. I want to thank the track chairs who we worked with very closely, of course, in getting these presenters as well. And, of course, also the organizing committee for the conference itself who supported us in getting all this arranged. We had 12 IW sessions on Monday and 12 today, and I think many of you attended those, obviously, and now we're ready to do the readouts. The way we're going to try to do the readouts is to do them in the order that we did them through the conference. So Monday AMs we'll go through first, and then Monday afternoon, and then Thursday early morning, Thursday later in the morning, okay? These are going to be in lightning style, so everyone's going to have 5 minutes. Michael's going to be sitting up front here, so when your presentation gets going, he'll be tracking and letting you know when you're getting down to 3, 2, 1, that type of thing. We do have a clicker up here, so remind me to hand that to you when you come on up. And so with that, what do I have, my bear showing up there? Oh, okay. With that, we're going to start off then with the first IW session. And Richard Hensley is the scribe for Dennis Stevens' session. And Richard, I couldn't get the title on this one, so please repeat the title, or maybe your slide has the title. And we'll get you started, and then we'll get going, okay?
And I'm out of order, by the way, because I have to go catch an airplane.
Yes. There are 3 exceptions. Okay. Thanks, Richard.
So Dennis was there to talk about 21st century risk management, and so we'll talk about a little bit of that. The first thing that we really talk about is why do we even manage risk, and what is risk, and what do we do with that? And it's to help have us good conversations these days. So it's not about risk registers, it's about to focus on some of those things that help us to have good conversations about those things that are going to get in the way of delivering value, right? We want to be doing that. Understanding viability, can we do this thing? Do we have all the right people? Do we have all that? And assessing the capability, is what's in place is what's in place, and what do we need to build? Do we have the capability to get it done? One of the things that we talked about a lot was the risks that you face in your organization are directly related to where you are in the journey of maturity with respect to delivery. Specifically, if you're in an organization that, it's the picture in the what is it, upper left-hand corner maybe, where we talk about two axes in this. We talk about is what we want to be, is the way we want to act somewhere between, let's see here, let me get the words right, predictive and adaptive, so that's the way we want to act, versus how is demand hitting us? Is it well-known, convergent, we have to have something that demands, we have due dates, we have regulatory dates, or things like that, or is it emergent, we're discovering it as we go? And then, so there's a journey through there. Many organizations, we start out up in the upper left-hand quadrant, we call it irrational. And making the leap from there clear to this market-driven place is not possible. So there's this journey around where you become predictable, then you become high quality, where you can deliver to ROI very quickly, then you make it into value-driven. The risks that you face are different depending on where you are. The other thing that we talked about was there are risk management schemes in place already. Agile is a risk management, is a response to risks that were being faced by projects. And the dimensions of measuring of risk have to do with the kind of 2-axis, certainty to ambiguity, and the number of pieces and moving parts involved on the bottom of that axis. And the green one is agile. It takes care of those not very many moving parts, but it will handle the range of certain to ambiguity with respect to delivering well. And PMBOK was kind of deals with a lot more parts, but doesn't deal with ambiguity very well. And our problems that we face today is the purple dot. These are, lots of moving parts, highly ambiguous, highly uncertain about what we're doing. And so that's kind of a way, the point there was that we classify ourselves on where we are with maturity, and we understand the kinds of problems, or we classify the problems that we have. The bit that is, this all leads to a tool. We've talked about this a lot throughout the presentations, and that tool is essentially risk categorization, risk clustering, And the way that we like to do this is we cluster risks and we call them risk drivers, and it's a systemic risk system. So it's not Joe will quit, it's do we have the correct staff? And if we have the correct staff, the project looks this way, and so we can have that conversation. And if we don't have the correct staff, the discussion will have characteristics that look like this, and those are the failure states. So it's about having discussions around risk management. And then if you look at Troy's work and some other work, you can start to quantify some of that. But the most important point here is that manage your risk, and you can do it with discussions, and you don't have to manage that many. 5 to 7 for a large project ought to get you enough to be having good risk management discussions. I'm done. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Richard. Our next IW readout, again, as Richard said, we do have a couple out of order from the order that they were presented. But our next, okay, fantastic. Our next readout is the session Crossing the Chasm and Pull-Based Change that Yuval Uret did. And I believe we have Karen Yohalam doing that as the scribe. And thanks to the scribes, too. I forgot to mention that explicitly. Let me get yours up here. Where's your clicker? Here.
Okay, so in the workshop, Yuval talked about pull-based change and crossing the chasm. And if to try to quote a good friend of mine, Edna, who left Amdocs about 2 years ago and went on pension, she said that the only thing you can make force an employee to do, is to get a salary. All the rest, it's better that they pull and decide, and this is why pull-based change is important. So the first thing we did is we reviewed the Agile Sparks way. What you see on the slide is the J curve of making a change. A lot of the time when we talk about continuous improvement in Kanban, we mainly look at the last column of the improvement, but before that, there is some investments that need to be made, something that people need to actively do while taking a risk, while giving up on things that they were used to do or are important to them in order to try and get to a better performance, a better operation. And this is the most critical place where the people in the workshop found to be a pull-based, need to be pull-based. The next thing we did is we looked at the enterprise journey board where we see the stages in making the change. These are also the stages that we had in Amdocs, in the change that we are still going through. And we discussed several ways to make a change. It can be evolutionary, it can be revolutionary, it can be all at once, it can be in a flow manner. And here we see the J curve, and actually this is what the Amdocs change looks like today. We still have several people who have not, several projects that have not gone through the change, and many of them are still in the stabilization period. Some are starting to go into the first improvement cycle after the big change. So for each of the stages of change, there are a lot of things that you can do, and there are a lot of things that are done as part of the change, and you can decide whether to do them in a pull mode or in a push mode. Now, we also discussed there are several types of pull, several types of push. You can also see it later after the workshop, but basically what we did is we let all the people in the workshop decide what are the 3 things that if we let the people pull as a first step to moving from to move to a pull-based change, what would be these three things. And so everyone had a vote, and they decided that the decision whether to go to Agile, Lean, Kanban, so this decision needs to be made in pull mode. When do we start the journey? When is it right to start? And deciding on the framework that that is to be implemented, Kanban, Scrum, SAFe, etc. We're gonna skip this one. Okay, these are the 7. Okay, we're gonna skip it. And here you can see some more information, further reading. Yuval, do you want to add anything?
If you want a copy of the handouts from the session, there are a couple of more near the water over there. And it's also available online if you want.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Our third readout is on the presentation, Can You Really Do Planning and Forecasting Without Requirements? That was Ray Payette's IW session, and we're going to have that readout by Doug Kirkpatrick. Let me get you started here. Okay, so you have no slides.
So Ray Payette's session, can you do planning and forecasting without requirements, probably has a simple answer. The answer is yes, but how good is it really? The most important requirement, of course, is time. He asked the question, why do we build software? We considered that, and the ultimate answer is to make money. No software company is going to design and build software without the expectation of a profit. And it's critically important to consider the viewpoint of all stakeholders in the development process, including users, teams, product management and marketing, the CIO, CFO, board members, vice presidents of marketing and sales. And they all have different interests. So you can imagine what the CFO's interest is. It's in return on investment, costs, and income. The sales VP is interested in price and volume, and the marketing VP wants to know the release date and when he's going to have product to sell. There are lots of different software methodologies, waterfall, Scrum, Agile, etc. But it's really crucial to use the Agile or whatever methodology you're using to develop the effort needed to produce the software. So there are different techniques, tools, story points, t-shirt sizing, weeks, etc. Anytime you can figure out the amount of time involved in an effort, you can evaluate that effort in terms of dollars. And it's absolutely crucial to develop that information and share it with all the stakeholders that we discussed. In addition to that, there are lots of dependencies to consider. You have users, implementers, support people, database administrators. What is the impact on all of these people? And what is the cost of those impacts on all those people? And to the degree you can provide this vital cost information to stakeholders before you write a single line of code and tell the truth with transparency, it's possible to know whether or not your software is even going to be on time or be late before you even write a single line of code. The visibility to stakeholders allows them to make trade-off options going forward. Stakeholders will appreciate the truth about costs and release dates, even if they don't like the truth. And one's biggest ally in this process probably could be the CFO, because truth for them is the bottom line. So very good session about developing software and the impact and the cost.
All right, our next readout will be by Helio Glazer on Kanban and CMMI.
In lightning or Ignite talk, so this is going to change every 15 seconds. So Kanban and CMMI, the summary of our discussion is that mostly CMMI, people don't get it. That's really the problem, and that's really where things get a little squarer. Why aren't you changing? There we go. CMMI is wildly misunderstood. People think that it's about the appraisal. People think that it's about doing things a certain way. They think it's about turning your processes into bricks and making those CMMI, everything else becomes subordinate to it. Well, it turns out that that's entirely not what CMMI is going on. CMMI is about improving the organizations. It's about not defining what the processes are, but it assumes the organization knows what it's talking about, knows that what its workflow is. That is a basic understanding. Unfortunately, many, often software organizations, have no formal definition of their workflow. You come in and they don't yet know what it is that they're doing, which is why I enjoy Kanban so much. We'll get into that in a moment. CMMI's practices are not to define the organization's processes, but CMMI's practices are to improve the organization's processes. What happens when you have an organization that has not yet defined its workflow, and here you have practices meant to improve those practices, which they don't know? That's disaster. CMMI also has an intrinsic set of practices that are designed to help you govern, sustain, and measure your process. Well, what happens when you don't start with a process that's understood? You have the practices to govern, measure, and to sustain them are completely misunderstood. So in the absence of an articulated workflow, too many organizations attempt to define their processes using CMMI, which are really only meant to improve the processes, not to define them. And that is a recipe for disaster. So what happens? In comes Kanban. But before I do that, let me talk a little bit about an example. Actually, we just heard an example about requirements. Let me call the requirements something else. Let's call it preventing undesirable scope. So if you were to think about how your organization prevents undesirable scope creep, what would you think about doing? So you'd probably think about things like, well, we don't want to have the customer talking directly to developers. We don't want to have people who aren't authorized to make approvals changes. CMMI simply suggests, why don't you and your customer have a shared understanding about what it is that the requirements are? And another thing it would suggest is to get buy-in from the people who actually have to do the work if you're going to accept a requirement. Where have we heard that before? CMMI has had these things in it since about 1987. And yet what happens is that organizations who don't understand that those things need to be understood first, CMMI doesn't say anything about how to do that. So what does Kanban have anything to do with it? Kanban starts with what? What is like the very first thing people are going to say? Visualize the work. Yeah, visualize the work. Second thing after that's probably going to be something along, why don't we define some policies about whether the work can happen, move the work between the workflows, between the different steps. How about focusing on quality, transparency, communication, collaboration? So what happens is many organizations, CMMI is already ahead of where they are when they start. Not to bust too terribly on other agile methods, but that's why some of the agile methods are so successful, because they're basic. CMMI, on the other, Kanban, on the other hand, also provides very simple, uncomplicated measures like time, quality, money. People overcomplicate it all the time. CMMI, unfortunately, though, was written for experts, and well, I wouldn't necessarily call the people who wrote it by experts, but it was definitely written for experts. And that is definitely part of the problem. So if I were to write CMMI, I'd rewrite it. But since I haven't done that yet, here's how to make sense out of any CMMI practice using the simple equation of commutativity, or whatever you want to call it. What's that equation called? A equals B, B equals C, then A equals C. A, CMMI practice as written. B, the practice reworded as the risk it avoids, the uncertainty it reduces, or the future option to avoid a risk or uncertainty in the future. And then what does the team do to accomplish B? If they don't have an answer, they're exposed. Kanban naturally defines and exposes where and how to address problems where they don't have an answer to what's CMMI. Now, what does CMMI do? Instead of going searching naturally using Kanban, Kanban shortens that process. CMMI shortens that process. So here's a couple things to remember if you remember nothing else. Nothing in CMMI says that you have to use CMMI on everything or that everything in CMMI needs to be done. So what happens when organizations, they want the appraisal and not the improvement, that's where they get into trouble. Thank you.
All right, our next readout is on the presentation, Becoming a Successful Lean Product Manager by Melissa Perry.
No, I'll take that one. It's fine. Okay. Hi, I'm Melissa Perry, and we did a workshop on being a successful lean product manager. And the way I started the workshop is I asked everybody, what is a lean product manager? So the things that I heard were, without any prompts, people who are good at writing user stories, manages feedback loops, good at asking why you want it, not what you want, focuses more on the flow, and communicates a vision of the product to the team. And I thought that was great. And I also found out there was a lot of agile coaches from these answers in our workshop. Now, to me, what a lean product manager is somebody who de-risks what we build. Now, what we've been talking about here is a lot of risk, but we're talking about risk in the development process. What we need to start talking about, too, is the risk of building the wrong thing. And that's what we really focus on with lean product management. We need to make sure that we're not just making crappy products faster. So this is a problem that we have with waterfall. It's a one-way loop. When you do the waterfall process, you don't find out until you deploy that you built the wrong thing for people. And waterfall product managers usually act like this. They have a crystal ball. They think that they know what they want to build. They do a little bit of research at the beginning, not a lot, and then they just build it. Lots of documentation, lots of specs. And we go into this build all the things mode. Let's just build all the features, all the solutions that we want, everything you could possibly imagine, put it out to the customer, because that must be the solution, right? And our customers go, no, I don't want that. Like, why'd you just build me this crap? So that's why when we talk about lean product managers, I'm talking about the build, measure, learn process here at the beginning. Build something to make sure that we know what we should build the whole product for, measure it with customers in a very quick feedback loop, learn from them, and invest time in that. So lean product managers really focus on the problem. They're very, very, very set on focusing on the problem for people. They want to make sure they're not building solutions that people don't need. So we do that by testing our assumptions. We run small experiments to test our assumptions about our users and about the problems that they have. So these are called MVPs, minimum viable products, that we build in a day or a week, something to get out fast and make sure people want our solutions and that they actually have these problems. And we focus on small batches. So very small tests that don't involve a lot of code, sometimes no code, to just put things out and test. And lean product managers are also responsible for shared understanding, making sure that the entire team understands who our customers are, what their problems are, what are their values. So developers, sales team, everybody, they're in the core of this, making sure that we are focused on our customers and what they actually want. And we usually work in small cross-functional teams doing these types of processes too. So a few developers, one product manager, everybody working very close and not siloed. What about user stories? We got this question in there too. One of the things that I like to focus on as a lean product manager is jobs to be done. I think it's a great framework because you think of jobs to be done that somebody hires a product to do a job for them. So when we focus on jobs to be done stories, we say when somebody's in a situation, I want to do this from my motivation so that I can get an expected outcome. The problem with user stories is that many users have the same problem, but we're thinking of them siloed. So the grandma in Kansas City might have the same problem as a college kid in New York, and we consider different solutions for them when it might be the same. This is a different way of thinking about it. Another thing that came up was product roadmaps. And after a lot of discussion on what's wrong with product roadmaps, too many promises, promises that we break, too many constraints, we came up with the conclusion that product roadmaps were a little bit like a tunnel to go down. So there weren't really a map to guide you, but more of a tunnel. So I introduced this thing called a problem-driven roadmap, where instead of focusing on epics and features and solutions, we focus on problems. That in each quarter or in each sets of time, where we do this discover and experiment phase, and then we go into building and validating. So what does success look like for a successful lean product manager? Came down to two things. First of all, we're delivering extreme value to our clients. We're giving them exactly what they want, and we get this happy face on them. We also are meeting our KPIs and optimizing our businesses. On the other side, we have our teams connected to our customer. So very connected teams that know exactly what our customers want. They're really involved in this process, and they're passionate about what they're building. And that's the conclusion. So I'm Melissa Perry. You can find me on Twitter. That's how you become a successful lean product manager.
All right. Thanks again, Melissa. Our next readout is on the session, Plan Your Next Lean Kanban Change Initiative Using the Change Canvas. That was given by Jeff Anderson. And I believe Alexis is going to do the? Okay. Jeff's going to do the readout. Okay.
How do I make this work?
Just give me a second. I'll get you up.
This slide is, hi there. The purpose of this slide is big bang change is dumb. So don't do big bang change. If you do big bang change, you're going to face the evil change tentacle monster over there, and you're going to have the very protective change participants trying to protect the staff. Big bang change will result in actually a change that's not going to get you anywhere. And the third component that I can't see there anymore was talking about how change is actually, when it's done in a big bang, is completely unsustainable. Oh, now it shows up. Great. So, so what's the alternative here? My fellow colleague who stiffed me at the last irresponsible moment, which is why I'm speaking like this, came up with a method called the lean change method. And fundamentally, what you want to do is co-create your change or your transformation with the folks that are actually doing the change. You then work with them to identify the riskiest part of that change and start running that as a set of experiments, measuring your way all the way through. What did we do now actually in our session, so we can actually get to the meat of this? We introduced the first component, what I'm calling the lean transformation stack. I have a tendency to shamelessly rip stuff off from the lean startup movement because it's cool. They're younger people than in this community. They generally dress better, and they have nicer cars. With that in vain, we've got two components here, the transformation canvas and the transformation validation board. We really focused on the transformation canvas, and what this is a way to map out a transformation or a change into its component parts in a way that's holistic, collaborative, and it encourages co-creation without getting lost into the details. First, we focused on what are some of the urgencies that you would require to address a change. What are some of the personas that would represent how you feel people would behave and act in that future kind of target state? And we really tried to hone in on the idea of a persona. Who do you want to be as a result of this change? Rather than what do you want to do, what are your processes, what are your methods? What's that superhero that you want to turn into? Then we started looking at things like what are some potential options, some benefits, and some measurable success criteria. Great thing about the lean startup movement is you get to measure value, you get to measure learning, so we borrowed a lot of those concepts and brought them over to transformations and changes. And then finally, let's talk about some of the actions you can do to enable change and the poor little sister of change management with its communication. Let's try to figure that out as well. And the vision, well, we don't really care about that. No one really talks about vision. Sorry, that's because I forgot about that when I actually did the session. So here's an example. Here's an example of a canvas. As you can see, good artistic skills are not required. These are my drawings, and you don't even have to draw as well as me. Some of these were drawn by my 2.5-year-old daughter. So the idea here, though, be visual, be concise, be succinct, and have a good conversation around all the elements of this change. And you know, what's going to happen is your change is 95% going to be 87% wrong. By the way, when anybody who's giving you a presentation quotes a number, 75% of the time he's lying. The next piece that, that I want to talk about is how at a number of projects we've used lean change to get consensus on a wide variety of stakeholders. We then combined their canvases into a master canvas and then plastered this in the most public place we possibly could, creating a sort of, an artistic canvas for change, kind of a graffiti type approach, so we could get lots of feedback on it. So if you're interested, all of that and a lot more is in the Lean Change Method book, which has just come out. If nothing else, it proves that I can draw like a 2.5-year-old. And thank you for letting me talk to you for 5 minutes.
Our next readout is on the presentation Role-Based Guidance. How might the Kanban method influence your role? The presenter was myself, Frank Vega, but I had a lot of help from Jim Reed. He's going to do the readout right now.
How's it going? I'm Jim Reed. I'm an Agile coach for ReadyTalk in Denver, Colorado. I was a scribe for Role-Based Guidance, as Frank said. How might the Kanban method influence your role? Frank is the one who led this presentation. He has led this workshop, rather, a few other times, once at the Kanban leadership retreat earlier this year, and with his group in Denver, the Agile Denver Kanban SIG. And then on Monday as well, and is gathering all the results of those workshops and putting it in a blog on his website if you want to visit that for a lot more detailed information. Yeah. But I'm going to give you some highlights of it today. So here's how this went. Frank opened it up with the question, how might the Kanban method influence your role? Influence being the key there, because I think we've all, if you haven't learned by this week, you should have, but you start with what you do now with Kanban. I mean, it's understandable that people that are new to Kanban might say, well, I've done Scrum, or I've done Scaled Agile Framework, or I've done Six Sigma, and we had to have Scrum Masters and product owners and black belts and release train engineers and so forth. So, you start getting worried about, I wonder what new roles are Kanban gonna give us? Well, Kanban doesn't prescribe roles, no prescription needed there. So you start with what you do now. So you just got to think about, as you use Kanban to improve your existing process, and your key being there, you have an existing workflow, an existing process, how might your existing role change? So that was the basis of this workshop, and here are some highlights. I have included in this presentation some of the data from his other workshops as well. So this isn't all just from Monday's workshop. What we usually see in the workshops, the most common ones are the project manager, product manager, and business analyst are the roles that the group decides in a brainstorming session what to look at. This week we picked project manager and two new ones, management in general and individual contributor, meaning around, management around executive or QA or development management, and then the actual team members' roles like QA testing and support and developer, so forth. Some of the highlights here would be a project manager may facilitate the backlog replenishment, help make workflow processes explicit, or use probabilistic methods to better know when a project will be done, or they may influence workflow design, for example, maybe use less Gantt charts. The product manager role might be influenced in ways like they may now manage the age of work items in the workflow, focus more on what's wanted next, guide more granular new features. The business analyst may act as the voice of the customer, better understand and use cost of delay, define smaller sized work items. Management may focus more at the vision level, coach and mentor more, or seek more visibility and provide more transparency. The individual contributor may look to finish work before starting new work, expand their skill set, experience or seek creative tasks, be less individual hero focused. So those are some highlights of what the group came up with and what some of the other groups came up with. So you can find a blog on Frank's site that is titled the same thing, RoleBased Guidance, and it has the actual data and a lot more specifics, and you can use that as a reference. And also Frank's here, he's really involved in the community. I work with him occasionally in Denver, and I want to do more and more because he's a great guy. So work with him and find out some more info. Thank you.
I didn't pay Jim much to say that last line. Okay, our next readout is titled Successful Evolutionary Change for Your Portfolio. Pavel Brzezinski. Pavel will be doing it.
I will try to handle 3 objects in 2 hands. It may be tricky. What we've done on our portfolio management workshop on Monday, we started with that. This is an Excel sheet that describes everything you need to know about portfolio or of a company. And then you have a new prospect, which is pretty attractive. It will bring us 400,000 US dollars, so it's going to be awesome. In most cases, decision makers would take that project. Now, let's switch a context a bit. This is exactly the same situation, exactly the same company, except the visualization is kind of different. So here, if you know that each of those teams, which are rows, is like 5 people, and so what you see here is like you see commitments, all the projects there. You see capabilities, which is white space. You see all sorts of different classes of service. Now, if you know that this new prospect is 60 months worth of work and the deadline is September 2014, your decision would be totally different. And why? Because you use different tools that would inform your decision-making process with different bits of information. Because we are fragile to what Dan Kahneman calls what you see is all there is principle. So we are basically making our decisions basing on the bits of data we have at hand, and we don't look further. So there is a fundamental problem with that, which is that in vast majority of cases, our decisions in portfolio are based on estimated cost and expected profit. And by the way, we cannot get those numbers right because they are changing over time. So what do we end up with using typical tools for managing portfolio? We end up with overcommitment, multitasking, inefficiency. So the technical term for that is we suck big time in managing our portfolios. So what we did later was a game. So we used highly sophisticated, complex tools called sticky notes and flip charts, and we're managing our portfolio of that company for 8 months, trying to earn as much money as possible and keep our clients happy. Suddenly, we started using nice tools and nice concepts like portfolio Kanban, visualization, limiting work in progress by conversation, real options. We started treating each potential project as an option. And as we know, options have value, options expire, and we don't commit early unless we know why. We started discussing cost of delay for the potential project we were running. And by the way, cost of delay is kind of vague and fuzzy, because we may even have contractual penalties for delivering late. But, well, would our client execute on that? We don't know. We may want to estimate the value of a feature, but in terms of growth of subscribers number. But are we precise with that? Not really. So what we were also doing was kind of taking into consideration value. And again, this is kind of a tricky thing, because when you think about value, you should start answering question, value for whom? Our goal was to earn as much money as possible. So there is a value of running kind of projects that have high return on investment for us. Does it mean running projects that bring most value for our clients? Not necessarily so. And finally, it was kind of easy to avoid 100% utilization. Why? Because we used a tool that brought a very different set of information to us. So we started making our decision according to what you see is all there is principle, but a very different ones. So the bottom line for that is that the way we manage our portfolios is deeply flawed, because we manage our portfolio based on estimated cost, and we suck at estimation, and expected profit, which is a derivative of the estimates. So what we should think of is changing the tools we use to the ones that would give us important bits of information. And then we can earn $2.5 million plus in 45 minutes, which is what every single team did. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Our next IW readout is on the presentation Assumptions and Experiments by Janice Frazier. The scribe was Gina Marie. Do I have my scribe? She is the only one I have not met in the entire conference, so maybe we don't have her. Sam, are you around? Is she not around? Okay, so our first glitch, we'll see if we can recover it on the backside. With that then, I'm going to go ahead and move to the next, and hopefully this person is ready. The next IW session was Understanding How to Implement Self-Directed Work Teams. It was led by Doug Kirkpatrick, and the readout is going to be by Ray Payette. Okay.
There we go. So this was a precursor to Doug's session on self-directed teams, which I'm sure everybody found really, really fascinating and interesting, because very few people have had the privilege of working in those type of organizations, and as an old guy from the military, it was something that was completely foreign to me, so I don't think I'll ever work in that. He had us do an exercise that probably some of us had done in school, where you sit around a classroom and somebody whispers something in somebody's ear, and you pass it around the classroom, and at the end you see what came out the other end. And this was an analogy to the chain of command in most organizations, most traditional hierarchies with structures. And we had this little thing that was read out to us, which was fairly complex in total individuals, and we passed it around up to our fictitious CEO, who then had to make a decision on what we were asking to do, and then came back down. And all three teams in the group completely bastardized the whole thing. And our team I was in, we came back with Project Lightning Bolt, which was never in there, and it was approved when the CEO goes, we didn't approve that. So it was just a really good analogy about how things do get lost in the chain of command. And it's, completely non-real, because we actually do emails, but things do get broken in the chain of command all the time, and people don't get a chance to really interact with the stakeholder and with the people who came up with the idea. And it was just a really good in-your-face example of how things get lost and distorted in those organizations. We then led us through what you need to do in an organization if you're going to be successful with no formal chain of command. And it was about individual responsibility and what your job and your role was, and clearly articulating and asking people to write down what they had to do. What was your primary responsibility? What was your secondary responsibility? All the way down to like 5 things. He said, come up with 5 things that you do in your job, what you have to do, and how you know if you're successful. And then who are you responsible to make that happen? And it's a really interesting concept because you go, I do this, 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 my stakeholders are this, and this is how I know I'm doing it. And he goes, if you do that, and you have a communication, open communication with people, it's very clear that you can know when you're doing things well and when things aren't going well, and then what you have to do to correct it. And it was very, very clear that you could do that. And then he had to set up a fictitious company based on those skill sets that you have in your job and said, if you had to do a new division or a new product in your company, based on the skill set you know you have and who your stakeholders are, could you do it? And if you can't do it, then who do you have to bring in? And it becomes very clearly, very quickly, that some skill sets are there and some aren't, and it's very easy to do that in open communication. One of the key things, again, when you talk about that, is that you have to be able to trust people to do it. And Doug brought this out in his on stage presentation over and over again. It came to the forefront in the workshop as well, is that the fundamental key to all of this is open communication. You have to trust your coworkers, and you have to have people act morally and responsibly, which is something we've sort of legislated away so often in so many organizations, and Doug mentioned this on the main stage. We put rules and regulations in place because somebody does the exception. We have to really, if you're going to be successful in this, is have people act morally and responsibly, do the right thing. And then you have to hire the right people. If you hire people who just want to follow rules, who only do what they're told, this type of organizational structure won't work. You have to have people who are willing to take the initiative, see what has to be done, do it, and then follow up with other people and let them know they're doing it. That's really, really one of the keys of that. And that was it.
Thanks, Ray. Our next readout is on the session Making Sound Decisions the CBA Way. That was the session by Hal McCumber. And the scribe, Greg Howell, is going to give us the readout.
First of all, I want to thank you all for having me here. This has been a great conference for me. I live in a very different world than bits and bytes in the construction industry, and it's just been, it's like too much fudge. You know, it's just an incredible amount of intellect and capability here, and I appreciate the opportunity just to say that. Having said that, let's see, I got to do this, right? All right. So here's the thing. And I'd like to, this is going to be a little audience participation part. Decisions must be made on the importance of advantages. Let's try that together. Ready? Decisions must be made on the importance of advantages. Now let's just try it once more with a little more heart, right? Decisions must be made with the importance of advantages, on the importance of advantages. I can't even get it right, on the importance of advantages. This is a very powerful approach to decision making. It was developed by Jim Seward. There are a number of different ways of different kinds of decision methods within his larger umbrella. But the anchoring principle, the fundamental principle is decisions must be made on the importance of advantages. The anchoring principles is decisions must be anchored to the relevant facts. The pivotal principle is to learn and use decision-making methods. There's a number of those within the Choosing by Advantages book. The methods principle is different decisions call for different methods. Okay, choosing by advantages, we have alternatives, we have attributes. Attributes are characteristics of different alternatives. We have advantages, and advantages are beneficial differences. Ooh, I bet I'm supposed to advance this, aren't I? I can see it, there it is. Well, show you what happens. So we have alternatives. Each alternative will have attributes. Alternatives will have attributes, characteristics of them. Advantage is a beneficial difference of one attribute between two alternatives. Those We can figure out what are the important advantages by looking at those. That's a subjective kind of thing in some cases. Some are objective. And then we can add up the total advantages for the various alternatives, and we can choose by the advantage. And then if we're smart, we step back and reconsider. That's choosing by advantages, and I've used it routinely. For me, it's a great way. My favorite way of using it is on Thursday night when my wife and I are home and we're saying, what are we having for dinner tonight? And we say, well, there's nothing in the house. Where are we going to eat? I don't care. Do you care where we eat? Well, not really. And so we're in this kind of position of not having a strong opinion. And we say, well, there's 5 places we usually eat in town. What about Despo's tonight? What's the advantage of going to Despo's? What about Sawtooth? What about this? And pretty soon the advantage that we're actually most interested in that evening will come to the surface, and we can choose where we're going to go to dinner, even without an apparent strong urge at the first. I think it's really a powerful tool, and you should really get into it and dig into it. Thanks you again for having me here. Great. Bye.
All right, thanks, Greg. Our next readout session, it was on the presentation Breaking the Org, ran by George Schlitz, and the scribe Darren Ladd is going to do that readout for us. Darren, we're ahead of schedule, so you have 15 minutes to fill up here.
I'm just kidding. I'm not going to take up all that time, hopefully.
I'm sorry? No.
Thanks. Well, so my name is Darren Ladd, and I am co-founder with George Schlitz of Objective Change, and we talked about breaking the org. Now, one of the problems that we've been seeing over a long period of time, decades now, really trying to adopt, trying to introduce these great improvements, agile, lean startup, Kanban, is the fact that right when we start off, we really get a lot of excitement, a lot of focus, right? We get all of this just amazing opportunities, outcomes, improvements that are happening. And then suddenly, after a little while, the energy starts to slow down, right? The focus starts to wane. And in the worst cases, we start to revert, right? And in some cases, we even get to a point where we're not getting any value anymore out of this improvement that we spent so much money on, so much effort, so much time. And in fact, what we're getting is just a new vocabulary and basically doing the same thing all over again. So what happened? Well, when we first introduced this improvement, what we didn't recognize at that point was that the organization, the environment that we were introducing this in was perfectly optimized to get the results that it was currently getting, right? So the structures, the processes, the roles, the rules, the leadership were all working towards that current state. We're all supporting us getting that same result that we were already getting. And our expectations were that, hey, you know what, we're going to have this new environment, these new behaviors, these new outcomes. Yet, we weren't looking at the surrounding environment and realizing that really there are things that are working completely against us. And what we started calling this, George and I got this acronym SCRAP. And basically, just to let you know, we don't think structures and rules and culture and processes are waste. But there are situations where they start to take on that kind of idea, that mindset, which is when you change, when you introduce changes and your organization is trying to change, yet you don't change these, what you do instead is continue to add on. You continue to add on more process. You continue to add on more culture. You continue to add on more rules. Then it starts to weigh down. It starts to make it very difficult to get the value out of these changes that you're trying to get. And so at that point, it starts to feel a little bit like scrap. Now, what we're proposing is that right when you introduce an improvement, when you're trying to attempt to get new goals, you're trying to get new outcomes, what you have to do is start to look at the existing misalignments that are created from that, right? You're expecting new outcomes, you're expecting new behaviors, yet these processes, these structures, these roles aren't going to support that. And so you need to break those. And there's a simple process, there's a simple couple of questions that you can ask yourself to be able to really get to being able to deal with this and starting to align your organization to be able to support these. And here they are right here. I'm going to go through them quickly because I don't have much time. But although I said I had 15 minutes, right? No. So the first one is, what's the power of the improvement that you're introducing? So if you were going to package this up, put it in a box and sell it, what would you put on the front of that box? What's the power of this? What's the real benefits? Once you've identified that, then looking at that internal to your organization, what are the limitations that your organization currently has that you are expecting this improvement to overcome, to diminish, right? Let's look at that and say, what is the benefit of this? What are you going to get out of this, right? Once you have identified those limitations, then look at those and say, those already existed, right? They exist right now. That's why you're adopting this improvement. What have you created within your organization? What are the structures? What are the policies? What are the rules? What's the scrap that you have in your organization that's currently helping you accommodate or work with that limitation, right? Once you identify those, the most important thing at that point is then say, do we still need those anymore? Or are they going to create a misalignment as we move forward? Identify those. Figure out if you need to change them, if you need to just get rid of them. Some of them may even still be fine to keep, but be explicit about that. And then, once you've done that, once you've decided and worked on those, another step that a lot of people forget is, hey, you're making a change in your organization right now. You're introducing something new. You're expecting new behaviors. So there are going to be new limitations that expose themselves. Maybe they were already there, but now they're newly amplified, or maybe they're brand new to the organization. But then look at that, identify those, and then start to create the scrap, the structures, the policy, the roles, the rules, the leadership that will support that. And then at that point, what you have is you have an opportunity to really align your organization to the changes that you're trying to do, to the improvements that you're making, and really get the outcomes that you're shooting for in the end. And just as a side note, so what I just described to you is not something that we just kind of made up out of the blue. It's been being used for decades by people who follow Eli Goldratt's ideas. He used this to introduce how to bring in new technologies into your organization and get the most out of these technologies. Now, we've just abstracted it out and realized that it can be used for any sort of improvement at all, but he and the people who believed in what he did and saw the value in it really followed these for many years and got a lot of value out of it, and I think we need to start looking at that as well. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Darren. So as a good lean organization, we started off 5 or 6 minutes late, and we are now 5 minutes early. Of course, we did have one snafu, so there. Let's do this. Jeff Anderson, are you here? Did he step out? Alexa, are you here? Okay, let's do this. We have enough time to get one more in, so that means we're still waiting for the coffee and the snacks, I think, for the break, so we can't just let you all run out there with nothing out there. So let's go ahead and do, if we can. Hang on. I think, Alexa, are you ready to roll? Okay, let's go ahead and do, we'll come back and pick up Jeff Anderson when he's back. I'm sure he was expecting to pick it up after the break. If Alexa's ready, let's go ahead and do one and keep it in the order and go from there, okay? Got a song and dance? There's your clicker. And do you need it for your slide? Yeah, you're 14.
No, can I just use the computer?
You can use the computer, yeah. I won't force you to use the clicker. Okay. But it's
Hi, can you hear me? I'm Alexa. When I'm not touring with Britney Spears, I work for Jonathan Irwin at NEO. I'm going to talk about his workshop, Innovation Accounting. So I'll just start, even though we don't have the slides up. We started the workshop by talking about what innovation accounting is, and for any of you who've read Eric's book or Ash's book, it's mentioned in there, but it's not clear how to practice it, so that's what the workshop was about. So Jonathan had everyone write down their definitions for innovation accounting. Thank you. And everybody was pretty aligned about what it is, and this is Jonathan's definition. So the importance here is measuring and communicating progress. So when you're not making direct revenue, when you can't see it in the bottom line, how do you show that you're making progress? 3 key tools that we used in the workshop that are part of the framework. The lean canvas, so you can declare your assumptions about what you're building. The experiment dashboard, aligning your metrics with your experiments, and the experiment report, which captures and communicates these learnings. This is Jonathan walking us through the lean canvas. So during the lean canvas exercise, we declared our assumptions about who our customer was, what their problem were, and the solutions that would work for them. For the purpose of the workshop, we used Uber as our example. So we talked about different customer segments, travelers, business people, what problems did they have. We talked about socialites who needed a mini bar in their cabs. The key part here, you'll see there's five sections here. So we mainly focus on customer, problem, and solution. And then most importantly, cost structure and revenue. So the key of innovation accounting is being really clear about what's your financial model and how do your experiments align to the metrics that drive the financial model. Cost structure must be less than revenue. Seems really simple, harder in practice. This is the experiment dashboard. On the top, 3 key metric phases. So this framework is derived out of the Lean Analytics framework in addition to the Pirate metrics framework. Empathy, how do we know that we're solving a problem that people actually have? Stickiness, how do we encourage active use if we do find product market fit? And growth, how do we organically grow that product? Underneath, you'll see the Kanban. So you align your experiments directly with the metrics to know that you're learning and measuring the right things. If you don't get empathy, if you don't find a problem that people don't have, then you don't move on to active use. Revenue is pretty important. You should be driving it the entire time. This is the key of innovation accounting. Tweet Jonathan if you have questions, because I can't answer them.
Okay, thank you, Alexa. And I'm sorry, with the mix-up, I forgot to announce, I think you saw on the slides, Innovation Accounting was the IW session title, and Jonathan Irwin was the presenter. Okay, we're a couple of minutes ahead of schedule, but I think we're close enough, so we'll go ahead and take our break now. It's a half-hour break. And then so for those of you who are going to be doing a readout in the second half, please be ready, and we'll go in the same order. I think this is